Welcome to this full Tailwind CSS course. You're going to learn how to customize Tailwind, the fundamentals of Tailwind, how to do responsive design in Tailwind, and everything you need to know to start using Tailwind in your own application. So without further ado, enjoy this course on Tailwind CSS. Today, you're going to learn what Tailwind CSS is and how it works. And if I ever seem a little bit distracted, it is because my dog Ragnar, he's being a little needy right now, so I might have to give him some attention, but it looks like he just laid down like a good boy. So to continue this Tailwind CSS, in this video, we're going to do an introduction to it, what it is, how it works, and so show you some examples of it. This is going to be the first video of several videos that I'm going to create on Tailwind. I think it's a great project and a great library that you can use to style your application. So getting started here, I do have a project on GitHub. It is at code.ryansolomon/Tailwind that you can clone and then start up. And that is going to start up this website right here that I've created using Next.js. And it already has Tailwind set up within it. And we're going to kind of use this as, for me, for different notes that I want to make regarding Tailwind. And then also we're going to use the same project to show you different examples of how Tailwind works here. So let's get started here with Tailwind is a CSS framework packed with built-in classes allowing you to style your applications. You effectively install Tailwind and then add these classes to your HTML or JSX in React's case to style your apps. It works by scanning your HTML files and JavaScript components for class names, generates the corresponding styles, and then writes them to a CSS file. Effectively, Tailwind has all of these kind of pre-built utility classes that it already has in place. So within your React components or really any HTML classes, you can add these pre-built specific Tailwind classes to that HTML, and then that is going to add different CSS to it. Like you might add flex as a class name, and that is going to make that element display flex. So rather than adding a class name and then needing to go create a CSS file and target that class name, use a selector to select that class name, and then you write the CSS for that, all you do is to your HTML, you write the Tailwind class name, and then Tailwind will automatically include that CSS for that class name that you wrote. And one benefit of this is this can make it easy to remain consistent when it comes to your styling. You don't need to worry so much about having several developers working in several different style sheets using different classes for everything, which is a headache and a half if you've ever been in that position. And Tailwind also removes any unused CSS automatically. This results in good performance with most Tailwind applications shipping less than 10 kilobits of CSS code. Additionally, you don't need to mess around with media queries. You can effectively add mobile styles right into your markup. Different element states can also be done quite easily. So within Tailwind, it automatically removes any CSS that you don't use, which makes it, more performant. And I've worked in professional applications to where there's most definitely unused CSS being shipped to the browser, which anytime you can ship less code to the browser, it's probably a good thing for the performance of your application. And then also Tailwind classes support responsive design. So you don't need to go and use media queries when using Tailwind. You can add that responsive design within your class names, within your HTML, just how you do everything else in Tailwind. And then Tailwind also uses the latest features and promises to stay up to date with modern CSS. So with that kind of overview there, it might not be totally clear how Tailwind is actually working here. So let me actually go to my project here, and I have this header component within Next.js. This isn't necessarily specific to Next.js. This will look very similar if you're using Tailwind in any other project. But here within Next.js, so it uses React. So the only kind of React or Next.js specific thing here is that in React, this is actually JSX. It's not HTML, so it needs to use class name instead of just class. But in other HTML markup, this would just be class, and it would work very similarly here. So within this header component, I have written out these different classes for this unordered list. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually remove all of this here, and we're going to just style this ourselves. So let me go back And as you can see, I do have my unordered list here, but this is probably not how you want your header to look. Like I want it how I had it before. I want it nicely kind of displayed across my page here. I want to use position absolute, so it's not adding this scroll bar just because of the header. I want to have a little bit of padding around these. So how can we do this using Tailwind? Well, what we can do, like I showed you, is we can use Tailwind classes. And if you want to see all the different Tailwind classes, you can see that at Tailwind docs. So it's going to be tailwindcss.com/docs. And over here on the left side here, they have all of their different classes. And future videos, we're going to cover these core concepts here, but we can see all these different classes to where, for example, if you want to add different CSS display properties, then you can use the class name of block, and that's going to set something to display block. So you add this class to your markup after you already have Tailwind installed and configured for your project, and then you can just add block to a class, and that is going to make that element display block. Or if I wanted to make that element a flex element or a display flex box, I just add the class of flex. So I do, in this instance, want to make this unordered list a flex box. So I'm going to add flex as a class name. And then if I come back here and I look at my header, what you're going to see is this does make it now a flex box, because it automatically displays them horizontally. With Tailwind, since I already have it installed and configured within this application, I can use these class names and I don't need to go and write custom CSS for this unordered list, in which I would have to make a selector that is .flex and then use CSS properties that sets display flex. Tailwind automatically does that for me. But for any classes or CSS that I don't use, Tailwind's not going to ship all that CSS. It's going to optimize that for you here. So I'm making this class name is equal to flex. So that makes this unordered list display flex. Now, what if I want to go ahead and make this to be justify content evenly across my page, which I do want? Well, we can head back to the Tailwind docs here. If I head down to Flexbox and Grid and I go to justify content here, well, I want to justify content evenly. So I want to add this CSS property, but in Tailwind, all I need to do is add the class of justify evenly. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to add another class to this unordered list, justify evenly. And then I come back and let's look at my application here. And now I see that these are evenly spaced across my top of my page here. But I also want to add a little bit of padding to these. So let's go back to the Tailwind CSS docs. Let's go down to the spacing section. I'm going to go to padding, and I just want to add like a padding of 20 pixels maybe across. So padding 0 pixels would be p-0. So if I come back to VS Code and I do p-20, that's going to add a padding of 20 pixels to my header here. And that is a bit too much. So let's just do 10 and see how this looks. And that looks much better. So that gets me pretty far, but I also want to make this position absolute because I don't like how it pushes down my content and gives me this scroll bar here. So let's head back to my Tailwind docs. And if I go to position, I can see that I can just add absolute here to add position absolute. So I'm going to grab this. And as you can see here, we are basically just looking up these different CSS properties that we want to add to this element and then seeing what they're called in Tailwind. And then we don't have to write any of the CSS for this. We don't have to worry about another developer having another utility class doing different things and reusing a bunch of this code and like duplicating it and having just poor design. We have this all here kind of out of the box for us. So once you use Tailwind more, you won't have to like continuously look up what is setting Flexbox, what is doing this, what is doing that. And you'll just kind of remember them off the top of your head and it will go much quicker. But this is also for example purposes to show you how this works. So since we made this position absolute, it also shrunk the width down to just as much as it needed to for the content. So now we may need to make this width as 100 viewport width is what I want to do here. So we can go to width, and I'm not really sure where that is. So I'm going to go width, and then let's go width. And then I want to do viewport width. So width of 100 VW is W-screen in Tailwind. So let's go ahead and add that here because I want this UL to have 100 VW as a CSS property. So I need to add the Tailwind class of W-screen. If I go back to my app, you can see I now have my header kind of back in action here. Now, before we move on to the utility first concept, let me show you just quickly how you can change a different state of an element within Tailwind. So the state of hover, for example, and this could also be like if you mouse over or if you click on something or if an element is active, you can do all this within Tailwind as well. So when I hover over my list items, what I want to do is maybe change the background text a little bit to, I don't know, it'll be a surprise. So the way that we can do this is if I come to hover and then I click on handling hover, you can see that all I need to do is add hover colon, and then I can add what I want to use as my different style. So here, when you hover on this button in this example, it is setting the background to a different color. I think this is like some sky blue color, but I want to set the color. I don't want to set the background. So let me see, to set color, text hyphen black, text hyphen white, text hyphen slate, and that is going to be a different color, but let's do something maybe like a blue color is what I would kind of like to do. Let's do teal here. So to set it as this teal color here, I can set it to text hyphen teal hyphen 500. So I'm going to grab this. And now when I hover over my list item, I want to make it that teal color. So for this LI here, I'm going to do class name. And if this wasn't in React or Next.js, you just add class, but I'm going to do hover colon and then text teal hyphen 500. So then if I come back to my application and I hover over my different elements, you see it gives them this teal color. So Tailwind CSS, it is a CSS framework that has a bunch of these different utility classes that you can use out of the box. And then within your markup, your HTML, you can just add these different classes and you will automatically be applying these pre-built Tailwind CSS properties to those different elements. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of the benefits of Tailwind, how it works, and how it can be so powerful. We definitely have more things to understand about Tailwind. So in our next video, we're going to cover the concept of Tailwind being utility first, and then we will get to handling states in a little bit more depth, responsive design, customization, and some different concepts that you should know. So thanks for tuning into this, and I will see you in that next one. Today, you're going to learn about one key concept of Tailwind CSS that I think is very important to understand. Now, this is video number 2 of my Tailwind series. So if you're completely new to Tailwind, I would check out my first video where I cover what Tailwind is and just an overview of how it works. But in this video, we're going to cover how Tailwind is a utility first CSS framework. Now, I am within my website here that I created for this course. You can access this by going to my GitHub that is linked below, and then you can clone that repo and run npm run dev. And on localhost 3000, you should be able to see this website here. And I am on my utility first page here. And that is the core concept. Tailwind is a utility first CSS framework. So traditionally in CSS, you would need to add a class to your HTML. Then you would need to use CSS selectors to select that class or select that HTML, and you wouldn't necessarily need to add a class, but you'd use your selectors to select that element, and then you would write your different properties and values within your CSS file to style that element. In Tailwind, things are a bit different, in which you style elements by providing pre-existing classes to your HTML, or if you're using React, which this project that I've created here is in Next.js, so it does use React, but nothing in this series is necessarily React or Next.js specific. And then these utility classes will automatically apply styles that Tailwind has already pre-written for you. So Tailwind has pre-written all these different classes and styles within CSS files that when you add these classes, its CSS files will automatically target those elements and give them these styles. Now, you don't need to worry about performance here because Tailwind doesn't include all possible CSS that it has written within its framework. It removes all that CSS and it will only ship the CSS that you actually use. So it is typically pretty performant and doesn't actually ship much CSS to the browser. I think typically under like 10 kilobytes of CSS. So let's actually dive into my code editor here. I'm just within VS Code, and this is within my GitHub project here. And let's style one of these paragraphs. So we're on my utility first page here. And the only thing that you'll see different between this React code and just like normal HTML is that I need to use class name instead of class. And that's because this is technically JSX, which is JavaScript, and JavaScript has a class keyword. So I can't use the class keyword within JSX. So to get around that, React uses the class name keyword, but this would be the same thing effectively as having HTML and setting a class to it. So let's actually style this paragraph right here using Tailwind. So I already have Tailwind installed and set up within this Next.js project. But to style this paragraph, what you can do is just add different class names to this paragraph. So I'm going to do class name, and then I can add various class names here. So what do I want to do? Well, let's just increase the font size, or maybe let's make it italic first. So to learn how to do this, you can go to the tailwindcss.com/docs website. And on the left side, you'll be able to see all the different Tailwind classes that you can add to your HTML to style your elements. So here we're within the typography section and we are on font style. And all we need to do is set the class of italic, and that is going to set the CSS properties of font style is italic. So if I go back to VS Code and I just put italic for my class, and then I come back to my application, you see my second paragraph here is now font style of italic. And it is that easy to style your elements within Tailwind. So let's do font size. And we can do, let's add more of a font size. If we want to do font size as 1.875 rems, we can do text-3XL as a class name. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to add text-3XL. And if we come look at my page, you see that gives it a huge text here. So we can adjust our styles by just adding these classes. And let's add one more here just to make sure everything's making sense. Let's add a text color. Let's do something that pops out a bit, maybe like this orange color here, text orange 500, to add color of RGB 249111522. So just so we're clear here, within the Tailwind docs, you can easily find the different like CSS properties that you want to apply. So like in my head, if I want to add a color to an item, I'm going to come to Tailwind, I'm going to find text color, and I'm going to see, okay, I want to add the color with like this RGB. Well, then I just need to add this class here. Or if you wanted to make like a container as Flexbox, you go to the Flexbox and grid section. If I want to set the flex property, then I want to set, say, flex 110%, then I can use this class right here. Or if I want to set different display properties, like set display block for something, well, this CSS property will correspond to this Tailwind class. So for my font color, what I need to do is I need to add text-orange 500 to add color of some RGB that is going to be orange here. And then if I come back, we see that this is now indeed orange. So within Tailwind, you can add all these different classes that will automatically style. These are just utility classes that Tailwind has already created for you. And you can just consult the Tailwind docs to determine what class name corresponds to the CSS that you want to add to your different elements. Now, since this looks so disgusting, I'm going to actually remove all this. Well, hopefully that gives you a good idea of how these utility classes work. And up at the top here, you can see that I'm making my main element here a flexbox element that it's going to have the 100 VH, which is min height is the entire screen, or it's going to set the min height to 100 VH. It's going to place the items in the center. It's going to justify them between. It's going to make it a column flex direction here. So it's very similar to adding different CSS properties, but you're just adding them as class names here. Now, what are the benefits of doing things this way? Well, you no longer need to worry about naming your classes, nor do you need to worry about adding a class that does something another developer has already implemented. So you don't have to like come up with these arbitrary classes anymore for your CSS, nor do you have to worry about like adding a certain utility class in your CSS when maybe another developer already added that same utility class in another CSS file and you just don't really know that they've already done this. You don't have to worry about that with this implementation. Also, everything is reusable. So I can just add all these different classes to all these different paragraphs or in other components, and everything is reusable out of the box. And you're not just adding more and more styles every time you want to style something else. All you do is add the pre-written classes for those certain CSS properties. You're not just having this ever-growing CSS style sheet that you have to maintain. And this approach also prevents your CSS from being global because you're scoping your CSS to just the HTML elements that we're using here. Like you saw when I styled this P element here, I wasn't selecting all the P elements in my application. I was only adding those classes to this paragraph here. So it prevents these kind of global collisions within your CSS. Now, you might kind of be thinking here, isn't this just like using inline styles? Well, I mean, it kind of is, but there are some specific benefits to styling things with Tailwind in this way rather than just using inline styles. With inline styles, all of your styles are basically just magic numbers. So within an inline style, what I'm talking about is like for this paragraph, if I want to do a style is equal to, and then I would do font size of 30 pixels. I come back and you see it sets a font size of 30 pixels here. Well, like this is just a hard-coded string here, just like a magic number. And this can make it really difficult to have like consistent styles across our application. But when using Tailwind, all of our styles are coming from a predefined design system, which will make it a lot easier to have a consistent kind of look and feel throughout our application because we're not just using all these different hard-coded magic numbers with inline styles. Also, like with inline styles, it can make it really difficult to do things like responsive design, as well as styling different states, like hover and active state or other states like that, to where inline styles, like if I wanted to do responsive design here, it's like, I mean, I would have to do something like, okay, I would have to use JavaScript within React. And I would have to be like, okay, is my window dot width less than 500 question mark? Okay, make the font size this font size, else make it this font size. Or you'd have to do different kind of things like that within your inline styles. But within Tailwind, it makes it much easier to implement responsive design, which I'm going to cover in depth in a future video. But basically, you just will prefix your classes with when you want your style to show. So you would be like MD, and then you would do colon, and then like your class name. So when it hits like this medium breakpoint, it's going to apply this style. And it's going to be a very similar thing when styling different states like hover and active. It would be like hover colon flex. So when they're hovering it, make this display flex. That doesn't make a ton of sense to do in this example, but that is how Tailwind effectively handles their different hover states and responsive design. You will add hover, colon, and then your class name, or MD, colon, your class name. So apply these styles when it hits this medium breakpoint, which is much easier than just using inline styles. So I do think Tailwind has those benefits over inline styles, but we will cover handling different states and responsive design as well as customization in future videos here. So hopefully you got a good understanding of this utility first core concept of Tailwind, but stay tuned for these future videos to dive in a little bit more depth to gain a full understanding of how Tailwind works the benefits of it and how to use it in your application. So thanks for tuning in. I will see you in that next one. How can you handle different states within Tailwind CSS? And when I say different states, I'm meaning things like hover, if an element is active, if an element is checked, maybe even different pseudo elements. So like before placeholder selection or handling different media queries or attributes. How can you kind of handle these different selectors when using Tailwind CSS? Well, that's what you're going to learn in today's video. Now, I created this website. It is available on my GitHub, linked in my description below to where you could clone it, npm run dev, and you should see this website as well. But getting to handling states here, within Tailwind, you can apply classes conditionally by adding a modifier at the beginning of the class specifying the condition. So if you only want to apply a certain Tailwind class when someone is hovering over an element, then you can use a modifier at the beginning of that class. So what does that look like here? Well, if we head to the Tailwind docs here real quick, and we want to go to the hover, focus, and active section of this docs, you can see if you add this modifier here before a certain class, then it's only going to use this class if this modifier is true. So in this instance, if they are hovering over this element, this button element, then they're going to make the background some violet color. Or if it's an active element, they're going to make the background this violet color. Or if it's focused, it's not going to have an outline to it, and so on and so forth. So you can add these different modifiers to adjust the actual styles of an element when it has some state that is occurring. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this hover background violet 600. I'm going to head back to VS Code here, and I'm going to add that as a class name to my paragraph here that says you can apply Tailwind classes conditionally, yada, yada, yada. So here I'm going to do hover background violet. And if you see class name here, that is just a React specific thing. This is technically JSX and not HTML. But if you're working with just HTML, you would use class here, and this would work the same way. So I'm going to add hover background violet 600, and then I'm going to head back to my browser here. And when I hover over this paragraph, you can see it changes the background to this violet color. Now you can use modifiers for just about anything to mimic regular CSS. However, keep in mind that some pseudo selectors are going to be just a little bit different. So in CSS, it's first child, but in Tailwind, it's just first. So there are some differences between the CSS pseudo elements and pseudo selectors relative to Tailwind, but in most instances, whatever you can do in CSS, you can also do in Tailwind. It just might have a bit different of a name, so you might just have to consult the docs to make sure that you are using the correct thing. So let's go over a couple other pseudo classes here. So for pseudo classes, you have, of course, hover, focus, first child, etc. So if I head over to the docs here, you can see that we can handle all these different things. We can add first, last, odd, even, different form states. So required, invalid, disabled. And within these examples here, you can see that you just do disabled, and then the class you want to apply, invalid, and then the class that you want to apply, focus, and then the class that you want to apply. So very similar to handling the hover states. Now, as an example here, let's go and add, how about to all of our odd number paragraphs or our odd number children paragraphs, we will add a background, and we'll add a background of white. So let me go ahead and I'm going to add background of white, and I'm going to copy this class name, and I'm going to paste it to this paragraph here, and I'm going to remove this here, and I need to make sure to close my tags. And then let's copy this class. Let's add it to this paragraph, as well as this one, as well as this one, and this one. So for all of the odd paragraphs here, you should see that they have a background of white. But if they're not odd, they should have this background because we added this odd modifier. So if we come back to the browser here, you see that the odd number paragraphs here, they do indeed have the background of white, in which the other ones don't. Now I'm going to remove this because this looks particularly ugly here. Now you can also use different pseudo elements for these different modifiers. And here you can see that you can do the double colon before, double colon placeholder, double colon selection, so on and so forth. So let's head back here. And for these pseudo elements, maybe let's do selection here. So if we select some text with the mouse here, let's make it a certain color. And in this case, we'll make it this kind of pink color. So I'm going to go ahead and grab selection text hyphen. I'm not going to even try to pronounce that. So let's go back. We will add class name is equal to selection colon that word right there. And then we close that quotes there. So this will do, like, if I highlight this within my website, whatever's highlighted, it's going to change it to this color because that is my selected text. So if I come back to my browser here and I select this, you can see it's this purple color. But if I remove this class name here and I highlight it, you see that it's no longer that purple color. It's like, I don't know, this off orange color. So that's one way that you can use pseudo elements within Tailwind. Now you could also use the before content, placeholder content, all that stuff. It's going to work very similarly. Now you can also add media queries, and you do that by doing :sm, :md, :lg. So these are going to be your small, medium, and large breakpoints. And I believe you also have XL, 2XL, and different things like that. And when we cover responsive design, we'll head into media queries a bit more and how to customize those. But just to show you an example of this quick, let's actually do, and you can also chain these onto each other. So I can do MD hover background violet for this. So I'm saying in a medium breakpoint here, then I want you to change this to violet when hovering over this paragraph. So right now you do indeed see the violet color, but if I inspect and I make this a very small window and now I hover over it, you don't see it because it's no longer within that medium breakpoint. So it's only going to show this now on larger than medium screens. So here I see it, but now if I shrink it down, I do not see it. So that is how you can do media queries here, but we will cover this more when we get into responsive design. And just so you know I'm not lying to you, if I now remove that and then I make it a very small screen, you see that you still see it because that medium modifier was only showing this on medium or larger web pages. Now you can also use different attributes. So you can select when it is an open input or something like that, or if it's a checked input or very similar things. So if we head back to the docs and we look at their attribute selectors, we can see that they use an example of this div here and they set aria checked to true. And if checked is true, they want to show this background. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this here and let's just add this right under my attribute selectors. And I'm going to add, this is some text right here. And let me just format this a little bit better. There we go. And now if I come back to my page, I see this is some text and it does have this blue background. But if I remove this aria checked, and let me just actually change it to false, what you're going to see is that this no longer gets the blue background here. It actually gets the gray background because it's no longer aria checked. But if I change it back to true, you see it does go back to blue. So you can use these different attribute selectors here, or these attribute modifiers, to add certain styles when a certain attribute is a certain value. You can also stack these selectors like I kind of showed you earlier, in which if you have a medium breakpoint and you want the hover modifier, then you can just chain those on to each other. So just like I showed you before, if I only want to show this on, let's say, large screens, and I only want to show it when I'm hovering over it, then I can do LG : hover : and then the class name. And then my example should work very similar to before, to where on this large screen, I do indeed see this. If I inspect and I shorten this down and now I hover over it, I do not see it. So you can chain these onto each other with just using back-to-back kind of colons there. So MD : hover, or it could be like an attribute selector, ARIA checked equals true, : hover. So when it's checked and they're hovering over it, then you show this, and you can just chain them on each other like so. So that is how you can handle different states in Tailwind. Hopefully you learned a lot from this video. In my next video, I'm going to cover responsive design. So thanks for tuning into this, and I'll see you in that next one. How can you implement responsive design in Tailwind CSS? Well, in today's video, that is exactly what you're going to learn. And this is video number 4, I believe, of my Tailwind course. So if you're not familiar with Tailwind at all, maybe go into my overview video first. It might be a good idea just to gain an understanding of how this is all kind of working. But today we're going to cover responsive design, and I am going to be using the website that I created. You can run this website yourself as well by going to the GitHub link below and then running npm install and npm run dev. And you should see this website at your localhost 3000 here. And I'm on my responsive design page. So for responsive design within Tailwind, all utility classes in Tailwind can be applied conditionally at a certain breakpoint. And a good thing to note is that this works for all utility classes. So it works for color, it works for spacing, it works for position, flexbox. All of these can be applied conditionally at certain breakpoints, and Tailwind will give you 5 different breakpoints by default. So out of the box, it will give you these breakpoints, and you use the : prefix at the start of a class to add the breakpoint. And Tailwind is mobile first, meaning when you apply a breakpoint to a class, and I'm going to show you examples of all this here in a second, that class will be applied at the breakpoint and above. This means that you will use unprefixed classes for mobile and prefix classes for larger sizes. So by default, when you apply a class to a certain HTML element, that is going to apply to your mobile styles or to mobile screens. And then if you want to adjust those styles for larger screens, that is where you're going to add breakpoints. So let's actually go to VS Code here. And this is on in my responsive folder, in my app directory of this project that exists on GitHub below. And this is actually a Next.js project. So this is React here, which is why you see the class name attribute instead of class. But if this was just normal HTML, you would just see class here. And within this page.jsx file, let's go ahead and for this h2 here. So this h2 is what you're seeing on the screen right here for responsive design. For this h2 here, let's go and add and change the color here using a breakpoint. So before I get to that, let's actually look. By default, the breakpoints that Tailwind gives you, and this is the Tailwind docs here at tailwindcss.com/docs/responsive-design. You can see that by default, they give you an SM breakpoint, which is going to be 640 pixels, which is the same as using a media query, min width 640, and then MD, which is 768 pixels, LG, which is 1024 pixels, XL, 1280 pixels, 2XL, 1536 pixels. So if you wanted styles that only applied on very large screens above 1536 pixels, you'd use the 2XL prefix. But if you wanted to apply styles on more moderate size screens above 640 pixels, you'd use the SM prefix. So let's go ahead and show you how this works. So for my responsive design, let's go ahead and change the color on, let's just do medium and above screens. So I'm going to do MD : and then I can use any class that I want to. So in this instance, I'm going to do text, red, and I believe 600. So this is going to make my text red on screens that are at that medium breakpoint and above. So if I come back to my web browser here, you see that my responsive design header, it is now red because this screen is above my medium breakpoint. But if I inspect, you see that when I just initially inspect here, it actually goes back to white because I am now below that medium breakpoint. But if I widen this out a little bit, you see that once I pass that certain pixel number, it does indeed switch to red. And then if I use a smaller breakpoint, so let me use SM:text red, you see that it's now still red, and I have to go a little bit smaller for it to then apply those red styles. And then let's do XL here, and I have to make the screen fairly large before I see my red text. And I'm actually going to have to go to full screen here, and that's where I see my red text. So you can apply these styles conditionally at a certain breakpoint using different prefixes right before the class. And this works for all classes within Tailwind. You just use SM: and then your class name if you want it to apply at the small breakpoint and above, or LG or XL or 2XL. And that's how you can apply breakpoints within Tailwind. Now, as for a couple of other things to note regarding this, you can also target breakpoint ranges. You can do this by using a breakpoint prefix and then adding a -max: and then using another breakpoint. For example, you can do MD: max-XL: text red 600, and that will make the text color red between the medium and XL breakpoints. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this class here. And how about for this paragraph, I'm going to do class name is equal to, and then we're going to do, instead of MD-XL, let's just do SM-LG. I think that'll be easier for us to see. So what I'm saying here is I want to apply, or I want to make this paragraph text red when I am between the small and large breakpoints. So on an extra large screen, this text should be white. And when I'm below the small breakpoint, it should also be white. So if I come back here, you can see on this extra large screen here, the text is white. I don't see this red color. But when I make this a little bit smaller here, you see that my paragraph text turns red, and then it turns back to white here. So it's red, white, white, red. So you can see I'm targeting a range by using the syntax of SM:max-LG. And I could also use MD here. So here you could see it's only showing when I'm at like within the small breakpoint. It's not showing below it, and it's not showing above it. So when I hit medium, it also doesn't show. So it is exclusive, inclusive, then exclusive. So this is a way to only target the small breakpoint. So it includes the small breakpoint, but it excludes the MD. So when I have it set to large here, it's going to show at small and medium breakpoints, as you can see here. So that's how you can target ranges within your Tailwind styles. Now, what if you don't really want to use these default breakpoints? What if you want to customize that? Well, you can do that within your Tailwind config.js file, and you can use theme.screen to replace and not use all default breakpoints, or you can use theme.extend.screens to only replace certain defaults. If we go to our tailwind.config.js file, what I can do here is so I have this theme property within my Tailwind config here. If I do screens and then let's go ahead and set SM, and let's just set that to like 500 pixels. Since I didn't include screens within my extend property here, this is actually going to remove all other breakpoints. It's only going to define the small breakpoint. So now Tailwind doesn't know about if I change this to a medium breakpoint here for my H2, and I'm going to remove this class just to focus on one thing here. If I put this MD breakpoint here, well, since I replaced all of my breakpoints using screens, it's actually never going to change this text to red. because it doesn't know about that breakpoint anymore. But since I did define the small breakpoint, so I define this small breakpoint here, if I change this to SM, and then I come back here, you're going to see it is now red until I get below the small breakpoint, which I set to 500 pixels, which you can see in my little counter up here. Once I go above 500 pixels, it does indeed turn it to red. But like I said, since I used theme and I didn't extend, I just used screens. Since I didn't define a medium breakpoint or an XL breakpoint or anything else, if I use the MD prefix, it's not going to ever apply these styles because that breakpoint doesn't exist. So if you want to add all of your own, then I would use theme and then just set a screen property within this. But if you want to only customize a couple of breakpoints and then use the default breakpoints for everything else, then you want to add the screens property within your extend object here. So I have extend, so theme.extend, and then within my extend here, I'm going to add my screens property. So now I'm adding small of 500 pixels. So all I'm doing now is instead of having my small be 640 pixels, I'm just customizing the small to be 500 pixels. But all of these other breakpoints here, they still exist because I added my screens property within my extend object here. I didn't just do it right within my theme here. So now if I use the MD here, we should see that it still works, and we do see it does. So MD still works as we would normally expect because my default medium breakpoint is still applied. And then if I switch this to SM, we should see that my custom breakpoint, it also still works. So once I get below 500, it should no longer show. And we do see that my custom breakpoint still works. So if you just want to customize a couple of breakpoints, then you're going to want to use theme.extends.screens. So you're going to want to place your screens object within theme.extend. But if you want to replace all default, then you just do theme.screens. So you put your screens object within your theme directly, not within extends. So that is how you can handle responsive design within Tailwind CSS. Hopefully you enjoyed this and learned a lot from it. But in my next video, we will get into some more customizations of what you can do within Tailwind CSS. So thanks for tuning into this, and I'll see you in that next one. How to do different customizations when using Tailwind CSS. In today's video, I'm going to teach you just that. And not only that, but you're going to see my dog Ragnar hanging out in the background as well, which is worth watching till the end of this video. So this is a project that I created and it's available linked below on GitHub. You can git clone this and then run npm run dev, and then you should see this website, and I'm on the customization page. So we're going to go over a few different ways that you can customize your Tailwind projects or customize Tailwind within your projects. So here, you can adjust your theme at scale within your tailwind.config.js file. For example, you can adjust colors, fonts, spacing, etc. And we can see the color docs here by control clicking on this link here. That doesn't really look like a link because I'm going to be honest with you guys, I didn't particularly try to make this the best kind of styled application. I just wanted to like keep my notes here and have this here to show some examples to you guys. So let's go over to these custom color docs, and this is way too zoomed out here. So let's pull in on this, and down here below, you can see an example that they show. So within the tailwind.config.js file, within the module.exports object, you can have a theme property, and this is where you can add different customizations to your theme. So your font sizes, your spacing within your application, all this can be done right within your config. So this will automatically apply some of these things when using your Tailwind classes. So in this example, you can see that they add these different colors here within their theme. So this would be accessible by theme.colors. And then you have transparent color, a white color, a purple color, midnight, so on and so forth. So they're adding these different colors to their theme. And if you've written applications before, you probably know that it is super useful having different colors within your theme that maintain consistency throughout your application. And then you can see that the way that they can use this is Well, you can use the hyphen midnight, hyphen Tahiti, and different things like that. And I know I probably just butchered Tahiti, but you can see that they can select these different colors within their classes here because they added them to their theme. So let's go ahead and show you how to do this. So heading over to our application here, and this is a Next.js app. So this is React code that you're seeing here. This isn't really specific to React or Next.js, but one thing that is specific to React or Next.js is that this is class name instead of class. If you're using just regular HTML, this would be class. This is a Next.js or React specific thing, not particularly important for this video though. But we're going to go to our tailwind.config.js file. And what we can do is I can add a theme property here. And then within this theme property, I can add I believe it's a colors property. And then within my colors property, I'm going to go ahead and just copy one of these colors here. So what should I do here? Well, I think midnight sounds kind of cool. So I'm going to copy midnight and then this hex code. I'm going to come back here and I'm going to paste that in here. So within module.exports, within my tailwind.config file, I have created a theme property containing a colors property, containing a midnight property pointing to a hex code. So the way that I can use this within my Tailwind classes is I can go, so on my paragraph here, new class name, and I believe it's text hyphen color hyphen midnight. And this should change this text color to my midnight color that I've defined in my theme here. Unless I mess something up, then it's not going to change it. So if I come back, we can see that it did not indeed change it. Let me refresh just to make sure that I did indeed mess that up. So let me come back here. And what I actually think I need to do, instead of doing text color midnight, I think it's just text midnight. So let's go back here. Sometimes I forget the specific syntax behind these classes, but over time you get the hang of it. So it is indeed just text midnight. So you see, you get this kind of dark bluish color. So hopefully this is coming through on the screen here. Just to zoom in there nice and close, you can see it is that midnight color. So that is how you can add custom colors to your theme. And this would be a very similar thing if you wanted to add different font families, different spacing, like you wanted to have a certain, margin between your paragraphs here or something like that. You could easily add that to your configuration file and then use them within your classes, very similar how I did there. Now, you don't necessarily need to just add things to your theme to do this. You can also use arbitrary values, and you can do this by using square bracket notation. For example, you can do text hyphen square brackets 32px, close square brackets. So this is going to make, if I added this class right here, it's going to make this text 32 pixels. So you can add just kind of these magic constants here, these arbitrary values, or you could do a background is a certain color. Now, to handle spaces, so for example, say you want to put something as grid columns 1FR 500 pixels 2FR, or you wanted to do something like border 1 pixel solid black. Well, in CSS, those are all going to be separated by spaces. But in Tailwind, you can't separate your class with spaces. So you actually need to use underscores. So let me show you how both of these work. So I'm going to go ahead and change this paragraph's text to 32 pixels. So let's come back here. And Tailwind doesn't necessarily recommend using arbitrary values. They more so recommend adding these to your theme or using just out of the box Tailwind classes, as that kind of gives you the benefits of consistency and not having to rewrite all these values. But this is something that you might need to do for customization purposes. Hence this video. You can see Ragnar is very excited about this video as well. But let me go ahead and add square brackets, and then I'm going to do text hyphen square brackets 32px. So that should make this paragraph 32 pixels here. And if I come back, you can of course see that this is now much larger, 32 pixels. And then we can also, so like I say here, so instead of grid columns and then 1FR space 500 pixels space 2FR, you can do grid calls 1FR underscore 500 pixels underscore 2FR. So let's go ahead and take this and let's go ahead and just put this on my main class just to see it do something. So I'm going to switch this to display grid, and then we're going to do grid calls, 1FR, 500 pixels, 2FR. And you can see that definitely changes things and puts things into these kind of 3 different columns here. And just to show you it's working, if I completely remove those grid columns there, it comes back and just goes into this single column. So that's how you can handle white space within your Tailwind classes, but I'm going to remove that. And I'm also going to remove this class name here because I don't need this 32 pixels anymore. However, you can also use CSS variables within your Tailwind classes. For example, you can do BG hyphen, and then within square brackets, you can use some CSS variable. You just need to add that variable to some sort of accessible CSS file. So here I'm going to add some variable to my, or actually I already have a variable in my root CSS file here. I have this background color just set to blue. So I'm going to copy this here. We're going to head back to my customization page, and let's go ahead and put this class name here as BG hyphen, and then we're going to do background color. So this should access my CSS variable and make this paragraph's background color blue. And if we come back, we do indeed see that this now has this blue background color. So you can access your CSS variables by using the square bracket syntax and then just passing in your variable name, assuming you have defined that variable within your root CSS here. And additionally, with square brackets, you can use things like pseudo selectors. So for this example, you can use the square brackets, then you can use the ampersand sign, colon, nth child, fifth child, colon hover, colon underline. So what this should do is, if I add to this paragraph a class name of this right here, what it should do is, since this paragraph, I believe, is the 5th child, so we have the main element, and then we have child 1, child 2, motorcycles are going by right now, and it's kind of annoying me, child 3, child 4, and child 5. Also, nothing against motorcycles, just don't love them when I'm recording my videos. But this is the 5th child, so when I hover over this paragraph, it should make it underline. And you can see I used a pseudo selector by using the square bracket notation here. So if I come back and I hover over this, you can now see that it does indeed underline this 5th child. So you can use square brackets here to use pseudo selectors. And just to show you that this is working for a pseudo selector here, if I put it on my 4th child and then I highlight my 4th child here, you can see that it doesn't highlight this 4th child. But if I wanted to change this, I could change this to 4th child. And then now you'll see it does indeed add the underline to both. So that is some cool ways you can use square bracket syntax within Tailwind. You can use it for arbitrary values, you can use it for CSS variables, and you can use it for pseudo selectors to add more customization to your Tailwind classes. Now, you can also add base styles. So like usually you might do like a base reset in your root CSS, like setting all of your different, font families and font sizes and different things like that. And Tailwind suggests that you can add these to your body element or your HTML element and just add a class name to it. So for example, if you wanted to set the default text color of all of your content to red, then you could, to your body element, add the class name of text red 500. So within our Next.js app, we can go to our root layout component. This is just a Next.js thing. And I'm going to add text red 500 to my body. And I must have messed something else up. And so I'm actually glad I rated to this. Well, kind of, because I think this is a common mistake. So in your Tailwind config, so in my theme right here, I'm not necessarily extending the default theme here. So when I'm adding this colors property here, I'm not extending the default colors that Tailwind gives me. So that means that I'm overriding like Tailwind's text red color or text blue or text white. So I'm not extending them here. So I'm actually not seeing this work, but I'm pretty positive that if I comment this out and I come back, I see my text red is now working. So the way that you can actually get around this, and this is actually really good that I rated to this, is I can use extend and then add my colors property in there. So now it's going to basically extend all this Tailwind colors in the Tailwind theme, and it's going to add my own custom colors as well. So now we can see my blue is still working here, my midnight color, but I also have text red working because now I'm extending Tailwind's theme rather than just overriding it. So actually very glad that I ran into this. When adding these custom values to your theme, if you want to just extend your theme, this is very similar to with using breakpoints. If you want to just extend your theme, do theme.extend and then the properties that you want to extend. But if you want to completely overwrite the Tailwind theme, then you're just going to do theme.colors or theme.spacing to completely overwrite it. All right. So use the extend object if you want to extend the Tailwind theme, but don't use it if you just want to overwrite all the values. And you can see that's a clear example of kind of how that works. All right, so hopefully that's clear, and hopefully that saves you from making that mistake in your own applications. So that's how you could do that. Now, let me get rid of this because that looks absolutely awful. So I'm going to remove that, but there's a couple of other customization things that we can cover here. So if you want to use your Tailwind theme within CSS, you can use the built-in theme function Tailwind gives you. For example, you can add a button blue class, and then you can set the background color to calling a theme function and then accessing your theme colors to colors.blue.500. But let's actually make a button that has a background color of our midnight blue because we added that to our theme. So within our CSS, and I'm going to copy this here, but let's go to our global CSS and I'm going to just do button blue. Background color is calling our theme function, and I'm going to just do colors.midnight. So this theme function, we get it from Tailwind automatically, and this is going to allow us to use values from our theme here. So I could use all the values from the default Tailwind theme, so like color red, so on and so forth, because I'm now extending it instead of just overwriting everything. But if I do theme.color.midnight, I should see this midnight blue color for this background color if I add a button blue class name. So let's go ahead and let's add a button to the bottom of this page here. I'm going to do button, and I'm going to just call it blue button, and I'm going to add the class name of, I think it was just btn-blue. And if we come back, we see I now have my button that is that background color of blue. So that theme function allows us to access our different theme values from our Tailwind theme within our CSS, which can be super useful if you're using both CSS and Tailwind within your applications. And if I change this to, we could do colors.red.500, that's going to access Tailwind's default red color. So that is how you can use Tailwind theme values within your CSS. And similarly, if you want to have your own CSS media queries, but you want to base those on your Tailwind breakpoints, you can use the built-in screen function. For example, at media screen, so calling a screen function, and then using your Tailwind SM or small breakpoint. So I'm going to copy this here. We're going to come below this dot button hyphen blue, and I'm going to use this small breakpoint, and let's just make this button blue within, let's actually do a medium breakpoint. So MD, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to paste it here. So this should make our button blue when we are at a medium breakpoint and above. Tailwind is mobile first. So when you're adding your breakpoints, you're styling larger devices because by default, you're styling smaller devices. So if I come back, we see that it does have the red background, which is what we would expect. But if I make this a bit smaller and scroll down, we see it no longer has that red background because we're using a media query to apply this style based on our Tailwind medium breakpoint, our MD breakpoint. So we use this screen function and use our SM or MD or LG breakpoints from Tailwind, and we can access those within our CSS file in case we want to really conjoin our CSS and Tailwind together. So that is how you can add different customizations within Tailwind CSS. Hopefully you enjoyed this Tailwind course. I'll be making future videos to where I use Tailwind in like more practical real world applications. But this course should definitely get you started with knowing the fundamentals of Tailwind. So thanks for checking this out, and I will see you in that next one.